Imagine someone offering you $5 million, not to steal, not to kill, not even to ruin a business empire, but to make a billionaire fall hopelessly in love with you, and then disappear without a single goodbye. For struggling artist Emily Carter, it sounded like the easiest money she'd ever earn. All she had to do was break one man's heart. She promised herself she would never get emotionally involved. She promised herself she'd walk away the moment the money hit her account. But promises are easy to make, until the person you're supposed to destroy becomes the only one who's ever truly seen you. And by the time Emily realized she'd fallen in love, walking away would cost far more than $5 million. Rain poured across Manhattan as Emily Carter stood outside a small art gallery, clutching the last painting she hadn't managed to sell. 3 months behind on rent. Her mother's hospital bills growing every week. Her bank account barely holding enough money for tomorrow's breakfast. She forced a smile. There has to be a way. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead, "Miss Carter." The voice was calm, professional. "We have a business proposal." Emily frowned. "I think you have the wrong person." "We don't. We know about your financial situation." Emily's heartbeat stopped. "Who is this? If you're interested in earning $5 million, meet us tomorrow. 8 o'clock, Blackwood Hotel. Penthouse." The call ended. No explanation. No name. Nothing. Emily stared at the phone. $5 million? It had to be a scam. It had to be. Yet the next morning curiosity and desperation won. The Blackwood Hotel was one of the most luxurious buildings in the city. Everything inside screamed old money. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, security guards who looked like they belonged in a presidential convoy. A woman in a white suit greeted her. "Miss Carter." She smiled politely. "This way." The elevator climbed silently to the penthouse. When the doors opened, Emily found 3 people waiting. A gray-haired lawyer, a security chief, and an elegant woman whose icy expression revealed nothing. The woman slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photograph. A handsome man in his early 30s. Dark suit, calm eyes, a smile that looked almost reluctant. His name, Alexander Hayes, founder of Hayes Technologies, one of the youngest billionaires in America. Emily looked up. "So, what does he need?" The elegant woman answered. "He needs to fall in love." Emily laughed. "I'm sorry. What?" "We want you to make Alexander Hayes fall deeply in love with you." Emily blinked. And then, the room became painfully quiet. The woman met her eyes. "You leave." Emily stared in disbelief. "That's it. You disappear without explanation. Never contact him again. And in return," the lawyer calmly pushed another document toward her. A wire transfer confirmation. $5 million. Half paid up front. Half after the job was complete. Emily's mouth went dry. "This is insane." The elegant woman leaned forward. "We're aware." Emily closed the folder. "Why would anyone do something so cruel?" The woman hesitated, then answered softly. "Because some people believe Alexander Hayes is becoming impossible to control." Emily frowned. Control? What exactly had she just walked into? Emily tried to forget the offer. She really did. But every unpaid bill waiting on her kitchen table reminded her of the impossible choice. 3 days later, she signed the contract. Not because she wanted the money, because she believed she had no other option. The first step was surprisingly simple. Alexander Hayes was hosting a charity gala supporting young artists. Exactly the kind of event Emily would naturally attend. No fake identity. No elaborate disguise. Just herself. As she entered the grand ballroom, cameras flashed around politicians, celebrities, and CEOs. Then the crowd shifted. Alexander Hayes had arrived. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards like she'd expected. Instead, he stopped every few steps to shake hands with employees. He remembered names. He asked about their families. One elderly waiter accidentally dropped a tray of champagne. The room froze. Emily expected anger. embarrassment, maybe even security stepping in. Instead, Alexander knelt to help the man gather the broken glass. "It's all right," he said gently. "No one's hurt." The old waiter looked close to tears. Emily felt something she hadn't expected. Confusion. This wasn't the arrogant billionaire she'd imagined. Later that evening, Emily stood alone studying one of the charity paintings. A familiar voice spoke beside her. "That's my favorite one." She turned. Alexander smiled. "I've been trying to buy it for years." Emily laughed nervously. "Then why haven't you?" "Because the artist refuses to sell." For the next 20 minutes, they talked about paintings, music, travel, and childhood dreams. Not business, not money, just life. Emily almost forgot why she was there. Almost. As Alexander excused himself to greet another guest, her phone vibrated. One message. From the anonymous number. "Don't forget why you're there." Emily looked across the ballroom. Alexander smiled warmly at a little girl attending the fundraiser with her father. For the first time, Emily wasn't sure she wanted to break this man's heart. And somewhere in the crowd, someone was watching both of them. Someone who couldn't afford for Emily to fail. The anonymous message lingered in Emily's mind for the rest of the evening. "Don't forget why you're there." She slipped her phone back into her purse and forced herself to smile. This wasn't real. Alexander Hayes wasn't her friend. He was the target. She had signed a contract, accepted half the money, and promised to complete the job. There was no turning back. Or so she told herself. Over the next few weeks, fate, or perhaps careful planning, kept bringing them together. Alexander invited Emily to visit the Hayes Foundation's art program, where hundreds of underprivileged children learned to paint and draw. Emily expected a publicity stunt. Instead, she found Alexander sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping a 7-year-old girl mix colors for a sunset painting. "There," he laughed. "See? Too much blue makes the sky look sad." The little girl giggled. Emily watched quietly from the doorway. The billionaire newspapers described as ruthless looked completely different around children. No cameras. No reporters. No audience. Just genuine kindness. For the first time, guilt crept into Emily's heart. Days later, Alexander invited her to lunch. Not at a luxury restaurant. At a tiny family-owned cafe hidden between two old bookstores. Emily couldn't hide her surprise. "I thought billionaires only ate in places where reservations take 6 months." Alexander laughed. "I grew up eating here." He looked around the small cafe with nostalgic eyes. "My father used to bring me every Saturday." Emily noticed the waitress greet him by his first name. Alexander remembered her birthday. He asked about her grandson. When they left, Emily whispered, "You know everyone." He shrugged. "They mattered before I had money." The answer stayed with her long after lunch ended. That evening, another encrypted message arrived. "Report." Emily reluctantly typed a reply. "He's getting closer." Within seconds came the response. "Good." Increase the emotional connection. Emily stared at the screen. She suddenly hated those words. Emotional connection. To them, Alexander wasn't a human being. He was simply an assignment. A week later, Alexander surprised her with an invitation to his private estate outside the city. Emily hesitated. Accepting would bring her closer to completing the mission. But it also meant spending an entire weekend alone with him. She accepted. The estate wasn't what she expected. Instead of a flashy mansion covered in gold, it was surrounded by forests, gardens, and peaceful lakes. Alexander smiled. "This is where I disappear when the world becomes too loud." They spent the afternoon hiking through wooded trails. No assistance. No security following every step. Just conversation. For the first time in years, Emily laughed without pretending. She told him stories about her childhood. Her dream of becoming a professional artist. Her mother's illness. Alexander listened without interrupting. When she finished, he quietly said, "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else." She looked at him. "No one's ever noticed that before." He smiled softly. "Someone should." Emily quickly looked away. Her heart was beginning to betray her. That night she couldn't sleep. Standing on the balcony overlooking the lake, she heard footsteps behind her. Alexander joined her, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "I figured coffee was a bad idea," she laughed. "You guessed right." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Emily nodded. "My fiancé left me 3 years ago." Emily turned toward him. "I didn't know. Almost no one does." He stared across the dark water. "She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because someone convinced her I was becoming dangerous." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Dangerous? Those were almost the exact words the mysterious woman had used during the first meeting. Alexander continued, "Ever since then, I've never been able to trust anyone completely." He looked directly into Emily's eyes. "Until now." Emily's breath caught. She wanted to tell him everything. The contract, the money, the lies. Instead, she remained silent, and that silence became the heaviest lie she'd ever carried. The following Monday, Emily received another invitation. Not from Alexander. From the people who hired her. She returned to the Blackwood Hotel. The elegant woman was waiting. "So," she asked calmly, "has he fallen in love yet?" Emily crossed her arms. "Why are you doing this?" The woman ignored the question. "We're asking you." Emily hesitated. "I think he's beginning to trust me." The woman smiled. "Excellent." Emily slammed both hands onto the table. "I want answers." Silence filled the room. Finally, the gray-haired lawyer sighed. "He wasn't supposed to inherit Hayes Technologies." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" The lawyer opened another confidential file. Inside were old newspaper clippings, court documents, and photographs. Alexander's father had died unexpectedly 15 years earlier. Within months, several executives attempted to seize control of the company. But Alexander, only 23 years old at the time, had fought them in court and won. The elegant woman folded her hands. "Since then, certain powerful investors have wanted him removed." Emily stared at her. "So this is about business. It's about billions of dollars. And I'm supposed to destroy him?" "No." The woman smiled coldly. "You're supposed to make him destroy himself." Emily's stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" The answer came without emotion. "When you disappear, he'll become emotionally unstable. He'll make reckless decisions. The company will collapse. Our investors will acquire it." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You never wanted revenge." "No." "You wanted his empire." The elegant woman stood. "And you're being paid very well to help us." Emily pushed the chair back. "I didn't agree to this. You signed the contract. I thought I was hurting one man." The woman's expression hardened. "What's the difference?" Emily looked straight into her eyes. "The difference is that he's a good man." For the first time, the elegant woman's smile disappeared. "You've made a serious mistake." Emily slowly backed toward the door. "I'm done." The lawyer spoke quietly. "You can't quit." "I just did." As she reached the elevator, the elegant woman's final words echoed behind her. "If you walk away now, you'll lose far more than $5 million. That night, Emily drove straight to Alexander's office. She had made her decision. She was going to confess everything. Every lie, every secret, every dollar. She stepped out of the elevator. The lights inside the executive floor were unusually dim. Then she heard shouting. A loud crash. Glass shattered. Emily ran toward Alexander's office and froze. His office had been completely destroyed. Furniture overturned. Windows smashed. Security alarms blaring. And in the center of the room, Alexander stood motionless, holding a single envelope. He looked up at Emily with disbelief in his eyes. "Who knew you were coming here tonight?" Before Emily could answer, the envelope slipped from his trembling hand. On the front, written in bold black letters, were 6 chilling words. "She is lying to you, Alexander. The envelope slipped from Alexander's trembling hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The executive office was in ruins. Broken glass glittered across the marble floor. A painting had been slashed from top to bottom. Every computer monitor was shattered. Someone hadn't come here to steal. They had come to send a message. Alexander slowly picked up the envelope. Inside was a thick stack of photographs. Emily's heart stopped. The first photo showed her entering the Blackwood Hotel weeks earlier. The second captured her leaving the penthouse after meeting the mysterious investors. The third showed her receiving the first payment. Every meeting, every step. Someone had been watching her from the very beginning. Alexander looked at his voice barely rose above a whisper. So every conversation, every smile, every laugh was business. Emily's tears finally fell. It started that way, but not anymore. I love you. The words echoed through the broken office. Alexander didn't answer. He simply placed the photographs back inside the envelope. I need time. Without another word, he walked away. The elevator doors closed, leaving Emily completely alone. For the next 3 days, Alexander disappeared. He canceled every public appearance, ignored every phone call. Even the company's board couldn't reach him. News channels exploded with speculation. Is Billionaire CEO Alexander Hayes stepping down? Has Hayes Technologies entered a leadership crisis? Stock prices began to fall, exactly as the conspirators had planned. Emily blamed herself. She had become the weapon they wanted. Then another anonymous message arrived. You failed. Now we finish the job ourselves. Emily immediately tried calling the number. No answer. The phone disconnected forever. A chill ran through her. If the conspiracy no longer needed her, what were they planning next? That same evening, an elderly man appeared outside Emily's apartment. He wore a simple gray coat and carried a worn leather briefcase. Miss Carter. She nodded cautiously. My name is Henry. I worked for Alexander's father. I've been trying to find you. Emily hesitated before inviting him inside. Henry looked around the modest apartment and sighed. Alexander trusted the wrong people many years ago. He almost lost everything. Emily lowered her eyes. And now he trusted me. Henry gently shook his head. No. He trusted his heart. There is a difference. He opened the briefcase. Inside were old journals, legal files, and handwritten letters. Alexander's father kept records. Everything. Emily carefully lifted one document. The signatures matched names she'd seen in the Blackwood Hotel. The same investors. The same law firm. The same people. They hadn't just targeted Alexander. They had been manipulating the Hayes family for more than 15 years. Henry looked at her gravely. They don't just destroy companies. They destroy lives. Emily's determination hardened. I'm not running anymore. The next morning, Emily asked Henry one question. Who is she? Henry didn't need clarification. He knew exactly whom she meant. The woman in the white suit. Henry was silent for several moments. Finally, he answered. Her name is Victoria Blackwell. Emily frowned. The investment executive? Henry nodded. Publicly. But that's only part of the truth. He slid another photograph across the table. Emily's breath caught. The younger Victoria stood beside Alexander's father at a corporate celebration nearly 20 years earlier. They knew each other. They were partners. Henry sighed heavily. Until greed changed everything. According to the old records, Alexander's father had refused to sell the company to an international investment group. Victoria disagreed. When negotiations failed, the partnership collapsed. Months later, Alexander's father died unexpectedly. No one ever proved foul play. No one ever asked enough questions. The company passed to a 23-year-old Alexander, and Victoria had waited ever since. Patiently, quietly, planning. Emily clenched her fists. This has never been about revenge. Henry nodded. It has always been about ownership. Across the city, Victoria Blackwell stood in the top floor of Blackwell Capital. She watched financial news playing across a wall of giant screens. Hayes Technology stock had dropped another 12%. Her assistant smiled. The board is beginning to panic. Victoria didn't smile back. Not enough. What about Emily Carter? She's trying to contact Alexander. Victoria walked toward the window. That won't matter. Phase 2 begins today. The assistant hesitated. And if Alexander discovers everything? Victoria's expression turned icy. He won't. Because by tonight, everyone will believe he committed the crime himself. The assistant's face drained of color. What crime? Victoria slowly turned. For the first time, she smiled. The one we're about to create. Meanwhile, Alexander finally returned to Hayes Technologies. The headquarters buzzed with anxious employees. As he entered the boardroom, every director fell silent. Before anyone could speak, federal investigators entered behind him. One of them unfolded an official document. Alexander Hayes, you're under investigation for corporate fraud, market manipulation, and the destruction of shareholder assets. The room erupted in shocked voices. Alexander remained perfectly still. What evidence do you have? The lead investigator placed a flash drive on the conference table. Enough to destroy your company. Alexander looked at the drive, then slowly raised his eyes. For a brief moment, he remembered Emily's warning. Had she been telling the truth all along? At that exact moment, Emily raced toward Hayes Tower with Henry's evidence in hand. If she arrived too late, Alexander wouldn't just lose his company. He could lose his freedom. And somewhere in the shadows, Victoria Blackwell watched everything unfold with quiet satisfaction. Her masterpiece was almost complete. Emily gripped the leather briefcase so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every traffic light felt like an eternity. Every minute brought Alexander closer to losing everything. Inside the briefcase were the documents Henry had protected for 15 years, board meeting records, hidden investment agreements, handwritten letters from Alexander's father, and a ledger linking Victoria Blackwell to shell companies used to secretly buy Hayes Technology stock. If the evidence was real, could destroy Victoria's empire. If they arrived too late, it wouldn't matter. At Hayes Tower, reporters crowded the entrance. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust toward every employee leaving the building. Billionaire CEO under criminal investigation. Did Alexander Hayes commit financial fraud? Emily pushed through the crowd. I'm here to see Alexander Hayes. A security guard stepped in front of her. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. No visitors. Before she could argue, a familiar voice came from behind. Let her in. Henry. Though retired, he was still recognized by longtime staff. The guard stepped aside. Emily sprinted toward the executive floor. Inside the boardroom, federal investigators projected financial records onto a massive screen. Every transfer appeared to implicate Alexander. One director shook his head. I can't believe you do this. Another quietly slid his resignation letter across the table. Alexander remained calm. I didn't authorize any of these transactions. The lead investigator answered, then explain why they all carry your digital signature. Alexander had no answer. Because they did. Someone had forged everything with terrifying precision. Just as the investigators prepared to escort him out, the boardroom doors burst open. Wait! Every head turned. Emily stood in the doorway, breathless. I can prove he's innocent. The room fell silent. Alexander stared at her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily walked to the center of the room and placed Henry's briefcase on the table. What you're looking at is only half the story. The investigators examined the files. Minutes passed. Then one investigator frowned. These shell companies. Another interrupted. They're all connected. A third opened an old shareholder registry. None of these names belong to Alexander Hayes. Henry stepped forward. They belong to Victoria Blackwell. The room exploded with whispers. One director whispered, That's impossible. Henry calmly answered, No. It was simply well hidden. One by one, the pieces fell into place. The fake transactions. The falling stock price, the anonymous messages, the attempt to emotionally destroy Alexander. It had all been designed to trigger panic inside the company while Victoria quietly purchased control through hidden investment firms. She had never needed Alexander to steal the company. She only needed everyone else to lose faith in him. Across the city, Victoria Blackwell watched the financial news from her office. Her assistant smiled. The investigators have entered Hayes Tower. Victoria poured herself a glass of champagne. It's over. Her phone rang. She answered without looking. Instead of good news, she heard a single sentence. They found the original documents. The glass slipped from her hand. It shattered across the marble floor. What? The investigators know about the shell companies. They're requesting warrants. Victoria's face turned pale. No. Minutes later, elevator doors opened. Federal agents entered her office. Victoria Blackwell. You're under arrest. She looked toward the skyline one last time. Years of planning, destroyed in minutes. As she was escorted away in handcuffs, employees watched in stunned silence. The woman who believed she controlled everyone had finally lost control herself. 3 weeks later, Hayes Technologies recovered. The company's stock climbed higher than before. The criminal charges against Alexander were officially dismissed. The board publicly apologized. News channels called him the billionaire who survived the biggest corporate conspiracy of the decade. But none of that mattered to Alexander. There was still one wound no courtroom could heal. Emily stood quietly outside the lakeside estate where they had once watched the stars together. She wasn't sure he would even open the door. When it finally did, neither of them spoke. The silence carried weeks of heartbreak. Emily lowered her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I lied to you. I accepted the money. I became exactly what they wanted. She wiped away a tear. If you never want to see me again, I'll understand. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, then asked softly, when did it stop being a job? Emily smiled through tears. The day you helped that elderly waiter pick up broken glass. The day I realized you treated strangers with more kindness than most people show their own family. The day I understood I'd never met anyone like you. Alexander's eyes filled with emotion. And why didn't you leave after that? Emily laughed sadly. Because by then, I wasn't trying to break your heart anymore. I was trying to protect it. Alexander stepped closer. I was angry. I was hurt. And for a while, I believed every good memory between us had been fake. Emily couldn't look at him. But then I remembered something. You confessed. You could have kept lying. You could have taken the money and disappeared. But you stayed. You risked your life to tell the truth. He smiled faintly. I don't know if trust can return overnight. It can't. But love. He gently reached for her hand. Sometimes deserves a second chance. Emily burst into tears. This time, they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of relief. 1 year later, the Hayes Foundation opened a new national center for young artists. Its director wasn't a billionaire. It wasn't a famous celebrity. It was Emily Carter, the woman who had once believed money could solve every problem. Now she spent her days helping children chase dreams she had nearly abandoned herself. On opening day, a little girl tugged on Emily's sleeve. Miss Carter, is it true you and Mr. Hayes are getting married? Emily laughed. Before she could answer, Alexander appeared behind her holding a small velvet ring box. The children gasped. Alexander smiled. I was actually hoping she'd answer that today. Emily covered her face, laughing through happy tears. You really chose the biggest audience possible? I figured they deserved front row seats. The children erupted into cheers. Alexander knelt on one knee. Emily Carter, you walked into my life carrying the world's biggest lie. But you stayed long enough to tell the hardest truth. You taught me that trust can be rebuilt. And that love isn't proven by perfection. It's proven by the courage to fight for each other. He opened the ring box. Will you marry me? Emily didn't hesitate. Yes. The room exploded with applause. Outside, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors they had once mixed together with a little girl in the Foundation's art room. Some stories begin with money, some begin with lies, but the ones worth remembering end with forgiveness.